a deck like Reid because it makes his Bonfire Dams that much better. But Josh is going to be on the play. It looks like both players kept their opening 7, I believe. And Josh leads with the Woodland Cemetery. He does not have one of his mana accelerants, though.
And what's going to be critical for Reid, as it traditionally is for Jund, is does he have a second turn Farseek?
Yep.
It sort of sets the table for everything else the deck is going to be up to, the pace of the game, and so...
So, not a great start here for Josh. He does have an Arbor Elf on turn 2. Unfortunately, he does not have a Forest in play to actually use it with just yet. So we'll see how that next turn plays out. Reid here just has a Blood Crypt. Looks like he has a second mana. Does he have that Farseek or potentially a Ground Seal?
Is it Tragic Slip to take care of the elf?
So not the worst shape for Josh. Again, he wasn't able to activate that that Arbor Elf yet anyway. However, here we see a Mulch from Josh.
And if there's any upside that the Junk Reanimator deck has in the matchup is that they have a lot of... Jund gives Junk Reanimator a lot of breathing room to get the Mulches and Grizzly Salvages and the graveyard value stuff online. Reid isn't going to put Josh under a ton of pressure, so Josh is going to be able to spend his mana in the early and mid turns doing things like this, mulching for a bunch of cards, possibly setting up his graveyard later with Grizzly Salvage.
Yeah, and the good news for Josh is he also drew one of the Abrupt Decays that he has in his main deck, so if Reid does happen to have a Ground Seal, he does have an answer for it. So Reid just passes with a third land, and Josh drew what looks like another Mulch here. So like you said, he's going to start being able to craft a good hand here and make sure he hits all his land drops and get a couple of creatures potentially in his graveyard, along with an Embargo Rights possibly.
So a juicy Mulch is followed up by a much less awesome one, but still, Josh has to be happy with the pace of this game. He's going to be able to set up a Thragtusk next turn with Restoration in hand, ton of mana to get towards Angel of Serenity. If you're Josh, you have to be very happy with the way the early game is setting up here.
Yeah, not terrible for Josh. He like you said, he does have a Thragtusk potentially on turn 4 or turn 5 if he chooses. He also has a Restoration Angel to blink it, and he does have an Angel Serenity in his hand that can come into play later in the game. And he has plenty of mana, of course, because of 2 Mulches. So Reid here plays a Blood Crypt and plays a Huntmaster of the Fells. So he's going to take 2 from the Blood Crypt, but he'll gain 2 from the Huntmaster of the Fells.
And Reid finally on the board here, taking a little while.
So let's see, Reid, again, not a huge card in this matchup in Huntmaster of the Fells, but can he draw the Olivia? Olivia is still a card that can really kind of shift the advantage back to Reid.
Yes. An early Huntmaster can be pretty good against some of the Junk Reanimator draws that are leaning on mana creatures, but we've sort of passed that point in the game.
Yeah, Reid didn't have the Farseek, and even if Josh did have a mana accelerant, we're way past that point in the game. So Thragtusk comes into play, gains Josh 5 life, bringing him up to 25. Let's see. It looks like Reid does in fact have an Olivia. So let's see if Reid decides to go for Olivia this turn. And nope. Adds another Huntmaster of the Fells to the board. Looks like we can potentially try to get some value out of those guys next turn. However, we do know that Josh has a Restoration Angel, so he will be able to blink his Thragtusk if he just chooses. Josh draws an Avacyn Pilgrim, giving him a little more mana to work with. And like we said, we know he has 1 Angel Serenity, and I believe he drew another one the turn before. So it looks like he has Angel Serenity times 2 and a Restoration Angel.
And the pace that this game is being played at, Josh is going to be able to set up a very devastating Angel of Serenity potentially in a few turns.
Yeah, so Josh attacks just to see what Reid's going to do. Reid tries to double block, and rather than sacrificing his Thragtusk, he brings in a Restoration Angel to blink it. So Josh can add an Avacyn Pilgrim to his board, and play another land and pass the turn back to Reid, setting up a pretty good Angel Serenity next turn if Reid decides to actually cast the Olivia.
Yeah, ideally Reid would try to pace the game in such a way where he played Olivia with a lot of mana up, but with him tight on mana and under the gun, he may have no choice but to try to add Olivia to the table this turn.
Yeah, we've seen Reid, be patient before, and I think that's exactly what he's going to do now. He's going to allow both the Huntmasters to flip to potentially kill off maybe a Restoration Angel.
We'll see what he's targeting momentarily, but Reid just passes with no play.
And I like going after Restoration Angel there. You don't want to expose yourself to a second Restoration Angel if you try to go after the Thragtusk. Plus, you're not too concerned about getting attacked on the ground anyway.
Yeah, Reid has the ground pretty well locked up. It's the air where he's soft right now.
Yeah.
So.
And, you know, Josh does have that Angel Serenity, so looks like Thragtusk is going to come over. It's going to deal with both those wolves. Now Angel Serenity can come down and target the Thragtusk in his graveyard along with the Restoration Angel.
Right, I think that attack from Josh there, he's happy if Reid does not block, and he's happy if Reid does block.
Yeah. So Angel Serenity does come down. Reid's stuck on 4 mana. Potentially could have a Putrefy, but it doesn't look like it. It looks like the ability of Angel Serenity is going to resolve here.
And I think Josh feels he can handle... He doesn't have to take care of both the Ravager of the Fells. He can play this more as a value play, as a large flyer, and make it really prohibitive for Reid to kill it by setting Thragtusk and Restoration Angel underneath.
Yeah, so let's see here. It looks like the trigger is on the stack. Reid does have some answers to Angel Serenity and Tragic Slip and Putrefy potentially, so he can prevent the ability from actually resolving yet. So yes, with the ability on the stack, Reid Duke is going to Putrefy the Angel Serenity. So now, if Josh actually chose to remove those creatures from the game, they would be exiled permanently. So Josh is going to likely choose to not use the ability and just pass the turn back to Reid here.
Shades of the old Faceless Butcher shenanigans.
Yes. So Josh still has a second copy of Angel Serenity along with the Abrupt Decay. And so it looks like, no, it looks like he did in fact remove them from the game.
I think because now there's another Angel of Serenity in the graveyard, he's happy just removing the Ravager. He can set his second Angel on an Angel of Serenity in the graveyard the following turn. And
so Josh did choose to let the effect resolve, effectively exiling the Huntmaster of the Fells permanently. He does lose his Thragtusk and his Restoration Angel, but like you said, he has an Angel of Serenity to get back next turn if he chooses.
He can start setting up the loop, and with Reid stalled on lands, not really making any forward progress in the game, Josh at 26 life. Josh has the luxury of playing a slightly slower, more card advantage-oriented game.
Mm-hmm. The only tricky thing here is if Reid does have a second Putrefy, Josh basically doesn't have much more gas after that.
Yeah.
He has plenty of outs. There's, you know, obviously 4 copies of Burial Rites, and Grizzly Salvage is another card that can dig for those, but let's see what Reid does this turn. Does he commit Olivia to the board? I think the fact that Josh allowed those cards to get exiled gives Reid a little information as to what's in Josh's hand.
Yeah.
So he's probably going to navigate this turn as though Josh does have a second Angel Serenity. And here we see a Garruk. It's just going to sacrifice to draw Reid 4 cards. So we're going to bring up Garruk Primal Hunter on the screen for you. 5 mana, Planeswalker, starts with a loyalty of 3, and the -3 ability is draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control, which happens to be Ravager of the Fells at a 4/4. So I think Reid is basically playing under the assumption that there is an Angel of Serenity in Josh's hand.
Yeah. Since Josh is playing some sort of slow card advantage game, Reid kind of needs to follow him in suit.
Yeah. So Josh does have a clear path to cast an Angel of Serenity here and actually get the other Angel of Serenity in his graveyard and attempt to start the chain, so to speak. Ravager of the Fells will get exiled along with an Angel of Serenity and a Fiend Hunter. They will all be placed under the Angel of Serenity, and now the path is clear for both the Beast tokens and the Avacyn Pilgrim to attack Reid down to 13.
Yeah. And Reid's drawn a bunch of cards, but he's still bottlenecked on mana here, so it's going to be really hard for him to efficiently deploy all the cards that are in his hand when he's facing actually a lot of pressure on board.
Yeah, Olivia would be a reasonable card, but again, he doesn't have that much mana to start getting it working. And at 13 life, you know, Josh is already threatening to attack for 12 next turn. So let's see what Reid decides to do this turn. He did discard a Bonfire of the Damned last turn. So not sure if he just doesn't think that card is really relevant here, or maybe he has another in his hand, which could be relevant a turn from now when he can do it for 3. So
yeah, he may feel like he just doesn't have time for what you're describing.
So it looks like, yeah, Olivia's going to come down here, and he does play a Blood Crypt untapped, dropping himself to 11, but it will allow him to ping a creature now. So let's see. Oh, so Josh draws a Grizzly Salvage, which he's likely going to cast. Can dig for another threat here. And it looks like there's a Thragtusk he can get. Ooh, a Vault of Archangels. Very good card there. Let's see what he decides to get. Vault of Archangels will effectively make any of his attackers a death touch, give all his creatures death touch and lifelink, so his Olivia won't really be able to effectively block any of them.
Yeah, there was a risk there that actually Reid could make Olivia into a 4/4 and then actually trump all of Josh's 3/3s and then have time to find answer the angel, but Falls to the Archangel completely shifts that around.
Yeah. So Reid might be in a position here where he might have to soak up. He actually has to block something here because he's at 11 because he took 2 from the Blood Crypt. So it looks like he's going to block a beast. And now are we going to get an activation of the Vault? Or is Josh just happy with passing the turn back and seeing what Reid does? He could always activate the Vault if Reid decides to ping something, which Reid can just ping the Absent Pilgrim here and kill it.
If I'm Josh, I'm totally happy with combat resolving this way, so I would pass, and that appears what Josh has done.
So now that Reid tapped out, he has to activate the Vault to kill off the Olivia, and he drops Reid down to 3 because 5 in the air came through along with the Beast token. So Josh still has that Abrupt Decay in his hand along with a Restoration Angel.
And a ton of gas still underneath that Angel of Serenity as well. Yeah,
so even if Reid does draw an answer to Angel of Serenity, he's still going to be getting back a second copy of Angel of Serenity along with the Fiend Hunter. Reid looking through Josh's graveyard here. It looks like he does have a Thragtusk, which can bring him up to 8 and block the Beast token. However, he still has to contend with that Angel of Serenity.
And setting aside everything that's happening on the board, Josh is now at 37 life, so he's going to have a lot of time, even if Reid is able to answer this board, to find a Burial Rites, additional Angel of Serenities, and Thragtusks.
Yeah, so if Reid has a Tragic Slip here, it's pretty good for him because he'll take 5 in the air from the Angel of Serenity, dropping himself to 3, but Morbid will be triggered with the block right here, and at the end of the turn, he can actually kill the Angel of Serenity, and Josh won't be able to recast the Angel of Serenity that turn. So Josh just plays a Godless Shrine. Does Reid have the Tragic Slip? He does not. So Angel of Serenity stays in play. Looks like Reid has a Rakdos Return, which isn't the most relevant spell right now. He does have a Bonfire of the Damned in his hand, which you could potentially cast for 3. Won't be able to deal with the Angel of Serenity. Let's see what he decides to do here.
If you were Josh, would you have not attacked with your token last turn into the Thragtusk? Yeah, the risk of Tragic Slip that you just explained.
I think you have to think. You really have to think about what's going on here. Reid has 1 mana untapped. The only card that can kill an Angel Serenity potentially is Tragic Slip. If he has it there, you know, it's not game over, but it's pretty good for him because you're basically left with an empty board, and he gets back a Huntmaster of the Fells, which you can cast this turn, gain himself a little bit more life, and he'll be left with a Beast, which you can attack, and also if he has a Rakdos Return, he can empty your hand. So I think you do have to probably play around Tragic Slip there. But fortunately for Josh, Reid did not have the Tragic Slip. And here we have the Olivia. So Olivia will be able to, wow, so Restoration Angel comes down, and if Reid doesn't have an answer for the Restoration Angel, then it looks like he's going to just fall to the Flyers right here. Yep, and that's exactly what happens. So if Josh didn't have the Restoration Angel, Reid could have actually just pinged the Angel Serenity twice, making his Olivia a 5/5, and been able to trade with the Angel Serenity there.
And then possibly start taking the game over. I mean, Olivia with 1 million mana in play is actually quite challenging for Junk Greener to get out of. They only have a few responses.
Yeah, again, Josh got a little fortunate there because if Reid did have the Tragic Slip, he could have Tragic Slipped the Angel Serenity at the end of the turn and then cast a large Rakdos Return, emptying Josh's hand, leaving with an empty board.
Yeah.
So Josh got a little fortunate there, and Reid Duke falls now in the finals 0-1 to Josh McClain's Reanimator deck. So looking at their sideboards, what do you think Josh is going to bring in here?
Well, he has 2 main deck copies of the Sig Slime, and I definitely expect him to bring in copies 3 and 4. The mid-range and control matchups for Junk Reanimator often are about casting a Sig Slime a bunch of times. The fact that it's also a Death Touch body on the ground is more than negligible because Reid has cards like Thragtusk and Huntmaster of the Fells that Sig Slime actually does some work with. So I definitely expect those to come in. I like having another copy of Obsidat. It's around a lot of it gets around a lot of Reid Duke's removal, and if you're anticipating the game just going longer in general, you kind of want to have more powerful 5s. I like having the Garruk Relentless in the deck for the same reason. And it's possible, though I'm not positive, that he wants to bring in 2 copies of Deathrite Shaman as well. Just because games are going to go on long, and the swings in the damage race both ways can be meaningful. I suspect it's actually not going to come in, but I do definitely like the 2 acidic slimes, the Obsidat and the Garruk Relentless.
Yeah, from Josh's side, I like the acidic slime because, again, attacking Jund's mana is almost as effective as attacking Junk Reanimator's mana. I do like the Sin Collector as well, just because Jund is typically a very spell-heavy deck, so a timely Sin Collector can be very important. I also like Obsidat as really a recurring threat, and it's something that's somewhat difficult for Jund to deal with. The one card I wonder about is Tristani. I mean, Tristani is obviously a card that you probably think about against aggressive decks, but could it be good in these type of grindy matchup? It is a 2/5, so it's somewhat difficult to deal with. It can block Huntmaster of the Fells, and later in the game, the populated mechanic, along with the life gain, could be very relevant.
Yeah, it basically depends on exactly how long you anticipate going. The scenarios you're describing all involve the game going very, very long, and if Josh anticipates that's going to be the case, then I think you're right, that Tristani can have a role in that matchup, so I'm curious to see if he goes there.
Yeah, so on Reid's side, he has 1 copy of Curse of Death's Hold. I don't know if you want that card in this matchup. Again, it's really good against dealing with those mana elves, but by turn 5, the mana creatures aren't nearly as impressive, so not sure he wants to bring that in. Obviously, the 2 copies of Ground Seal, bringing the total of 4 into his main deck, are probably coming in. Underworld Connections, probably not coming in this matchup. 2 copies of Tragic Slip. This card's interesting. Not sure you want to bring in extra copies of Tragic Slip in this matchup. Again, you know what Josh has in his sideboard. It is another way to deal with Obsidat. But again, it's maybe not that impressive, although it is a way to deal with Angel Serenity and Obsidat, so it'd be interesting to see whether or not Reid decides to bring those 2 in. Rurik Thar, probably not coming in this matchup. Same thing with Liliana the Veil. 2 copies of Duress, pretty narrow in this matchup. 1 Pillar of the Flame. I could see the Pillar of Flame coming in. Again, just dealing with those mana creatures can be very important. And Rakdos Return, probably not needed in this matchup.
I'm curious about Liliana, just because I can see it lining up either very poorly or very well against Junk Reanimator, depending on how the games play. Of course, if they have Unburial Rights, it can be a little awkward because you allow them to fire off an early reanimation spell. Though Reid's deck is pretty capable of handling a large creature in the early turns of the game, and Unburial Rights is often more powerful being just cast twice instead of being fancy with the milling it over early and reanimating that way. And the Junk Reanimator deck needs just more raw resources than Reduke's Jund deck to get going, so each player discarding a card each turn actually could favor Reid. The problem is that it matches up pretty poorly with Mulch. That's a card that can give the Junk Reanimator deck a ton of fuel to play with. So in summary, there's a lot of spots where I can imagine Liliana +1ing over and over again being very powerful, and some spots where I imagine it's a line you can't even take. So I'm curious.
If I was going to bring in a discard spell, I think the 3rd Rakdos Return might be the card I want to bring in, because we saw situations where it's one way you could actually break out of an Angel Serenity lock. If you Tragic Slip the Angel Serenity at the end of the turn and just Rakdos Return their hand, that is one way you can break out of the lock. And these matches usually go pretty long, at least in the mid game, so it can be situations where a Rakdos Return for 4 can be very good, even though there are Unburial Rights in Josh's deck.
Yeah.
So both players are done shuffling and they're pondering their opening 7. Looks like Reid is on the play here, so he's debating. It looks like he's okay with his 7. Or nope, he's going to ship, and so does Josh. So both players go down to 6. We've been saying this all day. In general, you figure the Junk Reanimator deck is probably a little bit better at mulliganing than the Jund deck.
Just because of the presence of Mulch and Grizzly Salvage, sort of grease the wheels early on in the game to find the necessary resources.
Yeah, similar to like blue-white decks that have cards like Think Twice and Azorius Charm. Those Mulch and Grizzly Salvage kind of act as similar ways to smooth out those early draws, so get you right back into games, even though you might have to mulligan early on.
The flip side is that the Junk Reanimator deck is, 3 colors. The mana base is a little bit stretched. It needs a lot of mana to operate, and it has a lot of expensive spells. So there's also hands you can mulligan into that just don't have the cards you're referencing and sort of just dead end. So I've seen it go both ways this weekend. I've seen it mulligan into Grizzly Salvage and Mulches and just be able to go. I've also seen it just mulligan into Angel Serenities and Thragtusks with nothing to grease the wheels and just sort of sputter out.
And you also get those draws where you get multiple mana accelerant guys, so multiple Arborels or Avacyn Pilgrims, into a deck that has 4 copies of Bonfire Dam on the play. Yeah. So definitely a very risky situation, but it looks like Josh does have lands along with a Grizzly Salvage. So he has some of the cards that can get him right back into it. He's happy with his 6. Unfortunately for Reid Duke, down a game, he's going to have to go down to 5 cards now.
Yeah, this is a... doesn't really need to be said, but Reid in a tough spot.
Yeah. Again, Reid does have cards that can get him out of this situation. You know, Farseek into Olivia, there's not many cards in the Reanimator deck that can deal with an Olivia early on. So Reid certainly has cards that can get him out of it. Same thing with a Ground Seal. You know, a Ground Seal cantrip, it can shut off a lot of Josh's deck. So let's see if Reid is happy with his 5-card hand, and if he can actually navigate those cards into a win here.
Another issue with the mulligans is it just magnifies the power of acidic slime in the matchup. Reid's down so many raw resources. He's likely to be missing land drops or colors of mana, or be more sensitive to getting Stone Rain in general.
But if anyone can pull it out, Reid Duke can.
Platinum level pro.
Platinum level pro.
Uranium level haircut. Reid Duke.
So Reid Duke here looking over his 5-card hand. Yep. Begrudgingly keeps turn 1 Overgrown Tomb.
And it looks like Josh is mulligan into a hand with all of his colors of mana, land drops, Grizzly Salvage, and Mulch, if I'm looking correctly. So pretty close to a perfect mulligan.
But thankfully, Josh just drew 2 lands for his turns 1 and 2. So not the worst situation for Reid. We're going to see a Mulcher. Ooh, looks like Josh brought in Voice of Resurgence. And you know, not a bad start for Reid. We got a turn 2 Mulch.
Right.
And missed all the lands.
All right,
and
so we're both on 5 cards now.
Yeah, so we're both on 5 cards. Didn't hit an Unburial Rites or really a fatty. So not a bad start for Reid. There's that Acidic Slime we mentioned. And it looks like he boarded into Tristani too. So Tristani could come down on turn 4 here. And I definitely like bringing in Tristani.
Just the anticipation that the game's going to go very long.
Yeah, I think it's going to go long. Plus, I just think it's a good 4-drop, especially a good follow-up to Huntmaster of the Fells.
Sure.
So Reid Duke here on 3 mana. He does have all his colors along with a Wolf Run. Does he have a 4th land in Huntmaster to get himself back into this game? Or an Olivia, even. Looks like he's pondering his play here. Looks like there is an Olivia in his hand. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the 4th land. Thankfully, though, he at least has a Farseek. So he will be able to Farseek for a land here, getting him up to 4 mana. Unfortunately, he won't be able to cast any of the 4 drops in his hand this turn.
But Reid, you know, still kind of keeping his head above water. It's hard to know the actual scope of Josh's hand because, again, the pacing of this game is going to be very slow. But
oh yeah, definitely not a bad situation for Reid, considering he hit the mulligan to 5. Josh didn't have a mana accelerant, so Acidic Slime won't be coming out until at least turn 5, and he also missed on a Mulch. So not the worst situation for Reid. And it looks like Reid does have an Olivia, which is one of the cards we mentioned, could pull him right back into this match.
Yeah.
Oh wow, so Reid does have a Cavern of Souls here, so he actually could have cast Olivia this turn, but it looks like he's playing around Garruk Relentless, knowing that Olivia is probably one of the few ways I can get myself back into this match.
So you see an end of turn Grizzly Salvage from Josh, living over 3 lands, including Cavern of Souls, an Acidic Slime, and a Tristani. Josh takes the Acidic Slime to pair with the other one that's already in his hand.
Looks like Josh is going to be trying to chain Acidic Slimes eventually. Here we have, looks like Tristani is going to come down potentially. And yes, here she is, Tristani at 2/5. We'll bring her up on the screen for you. 2/5, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. And for 3 mana, you can populate.
4 copies of this card were in Pro Tour Dragons Maze Champions Craig Wesco's sideboard.
Wow, so Rakdos return for 3. Let's see, tough spot for Josh here. Forced to discard 1 of his Acidic Slimes along with 2 lands. So I believe he has 1 more Acidic Slime in his hand.
Yeah, I believe he kept Acidic Slime.
And yep, it looks like we have an Avacyn Pilgrim and he's going to gain a life. So again, pretty good situation for Reid out here considering at the mulligan to 5. Josh doesn't have that much more gas left. Can he draw 6 mana so he can cast his Olivia and ping that Avacyn Pilgrim?
Yeah, and then we have Olivia with a bunch of mana against just creatures.
Yeah, a 4/4 Olivia which survives a Garruk, and he keeps Josh off of 5 mana so he can't cast that Acidic Slime in his hand. So key turn here for Reid. Reid does have a Bonfire, so if he chooses, he could get that Avacyn Pilgrim off the board. Reid has to think here. He Grizzly salvaged 4 that acidic slime, and yet he discarded it. So what is that last card in his hand? He discarded 2 lands and missed the land drop.
I mean, if I'm in Reid's position, I would suspect that the last card in hand, given that the Tristani's in play, was Thragtusk.
Wow, so great situation there. Very smart play from Reid. He kind of put Josh on having a 5-drop in his hand, knowing that he missed the land drop and discarded 2. So here's an Arbor Elf, but not a 5th land. So if he can get a 6th land here, he can get that Olivia into play. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a 6 mana, but it looks like it's time for Olivia to come into play anyway.
And this matches up very well against...
Oh, he does. He was slow rolling it. So Olivia comes down and pings the Arbor Elf, keeping Josh off of 5 mana and stranding that acidic slime into his hand.
And now Reid well on the front foot. 6 mana in play with Olivia. Acidic slime. It does take out the Keswick Wolf Run if Josh wants to, which is valuable here, but it's just going to get mowed down by Olivia.
Yeah, so really good situation for Reid. Reid likely to just kill this acidic slime as soon as possible, not wanting any Restoration Angel shenanigans to happen. He can ping the acidic slime, growing his Olivia to a 6/6, dropping Josh to 11. So let's see what Reid decides to do this turn. Looks like he has a 6th land. Does he want to just potentially wait a turn? Yep, so he's just going to ping it, do as much damage as he can. No, he's going to ping it once.
Turn into a vampire and then try to take control of it. Remember, Josh milled over 2 copies of Restoration Angel to... Okay, he's just going to finish.
No, he's going to finish it off. And so...
Ping it on the upkeep, so that way Olivia grows. Keep in mind that Reid still has mana up to respond and kill the acidic slime if he's feeling so inclined.
Yeah, so he could just pass. If Josh passes the turn, Reid probably does nothing, and he's kind of playing around in burial rights, I suppose now.
Yes.
Now with Josh with an empty hand, I think it's safe to ping it, but it looks like he's not going to do it. Safe to just untap here.
Well, now Reid can steal it.
He wants to just. Well, I think he wants to just keep growing his Olivia.
Sure.
So now Olivia's a 6/6. Josh is at 12. He's got a 2-turn clock no matter what. Does he have an 8th mana, a 7th mana here? He can ping something and steal if he has a 7th mana.
Reid in a really impressive recovery off of this mulligan to 5.
Yeah, you know, and again, Olivia just shows you how powerful that card is in this matchup. It was one of the cards we said. Doesn't matter if he mulligans to 5. If Olivia can take over this game, we're in good shape. So, looks like we have Garruk Primal Hunter coming down here. Are we going to draw 6 cards? Yes, we are. Garruk Primal Hunter gets binned, and Reid Duke will draw 6 cards off of it. Further improving his game state right here. And
now Josh is officially on the ropes.
Yeah, Reid's going to play a 7th land now. He's going to ping Acidic Slime just to grow his Olivia, and now Josh drops to 5. So now Josh is actually in Bonfire the range pretty close, even if he does draw an answer to Olivia somehow.
Yeah.
With only 6 mana and no cards in his hand, an Angel of Serenity will not do the job here. And he doesn't have that many good cards in his sideboard. He does, in his graveyard rather. He does have a Restoration Angel, so if he draws an Burial Rites, that could maybe buy him a turn. But again, Reid has plenty of mana to ping down to 4 toughness. So Josh just attacks for 2. Looks like we might have yep, Burial Rites gets cast. Looks like it's going to target one of the Restoration Angels, blinking an Acidic Slab, taking out a land. So this is kind of critical here because it keeps Reid off of 8 mana if he has one in his hand, which means he can't ping the Restoration Angel. However, if he does have a 7th mana, he can ping the Restoration Angel and steal it and then swing over the win. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. So Reid Duke, wow, off a mulligan to 5, pulls off game 2 to send it to a 3rd game.
Yeah, and you know, we saw a couple of Josh's sideboarded cards there. He actually did bring in Voice of Resurgence, which is actually a little bit surprising to me because to me it feels like the games aren't about that sort of thing. Josh needs to be overwhelming him with his reanimation strategy or locking out his mana with looping acidic slimes. So a random value play like Voice of Resurgence doesn't seem very well positioned. especially when Reid might still potentially have Polar Flame in his deck to handle mana creatures.
And its potential. I think Josh might have brought in the Voice of Resurgence simply because he's bringing into Tristani, and maybe Tristani in combination with Voice of Resurgence can the populate mechanic. He just wanted more token creators. However, I agree with you. I don't think Voice of Resurgence is that effective in this matchup. And plus, I think Tristani on its own can be pretty good sometimes, especially if you're on the play now. You can go turn 3 Tristani, turn 4 Thragtusk. You know, you're going to gain 10 life, and then even if Reid does have an answer to the Thragtusk, you can start populating, gaining more life, getting more creatures. So I think Tristani is still fine. Not sure about the Voice of Resurgence.
No, it is worth noting Tristani was very poor that game.
Yeah, Tristani didn't do much. However, I think that was in part because Josh just didn't draw much to go with it. He had a very bad mulch. He didn't draw a Thragtusk. And Reid did have the Olivia. So ultimately, I think Josh has to be in the position where, okay, the only way Jund is probably going to beat me is if they get Olivia going. So what can I do to stop that?
Well, the fear that I would have from being in Josh's seat is, are you actually... Tristani, to me, is declaring, I want to play a really long game.
Yep.
That's where the card is best suited. Is Josh actually favored in a really long game when he's playing against Olivia with a bunch of mana as a threat late in the game, Bonfire of the Damned, and Rakdos Return? To me, certainly Josh can't win the game fast, but I also don't think he can win the game by going terribly slow. I actually think there is this fulcrum point where, you know, Josh is sort of favored in the mid to late game, and then it tips over where Reid actually has significantly more powerful draws than Josh does. So I'm not sure if Josh can sculpt this game where he wants to play for 15 or 20 turns. I'm not sure he's favored in that kind of game.
Yeah, I think I agree with you too, just because the combination of Rakdos Return along with Ground Seal can be actually very devastating against Josh. We saw Rakdos Return was huge there for Reid. It kept Josh off of 5 mana and prevented him from casting Acidic Slime and allowing Reid to actually get an Olivia into play and actually use it. So definitely, I agree with you there. I think in the very late game, Reid's spells are probably a little too powerful for Josh.
Yeah, which makes me question, I guess, Tristani's merit in the matchup. If you aren't doing a ton of populating, you're basically playing it as a good blocker and as a source to gain life, which to me is saying, if this game goes on for 16 turns, I'm going to win. And I'm not positive that's the case.
Yeah, well, by that definition, then maybe Voice does stay in. It is a play you can make on turn 2. It allows you to attack and even, you know, survives most of Reid's removal in terms of providing you with an additional threat. So let's see what Josh does here. But I agree with you. Tristani did look pretty poor in that game.
Game 3 of the finals. We've had 2 days, 15 Swiss rounds, and now our elimination rounds of excellent Magic. And we have up-and-coming Iowa grinder Josh McClain playing against Platinum Pro Reid Duke. Junk Reanimator versus Jund, 2 of the most prominent decks in the metagame going into the tournament, battling it out for the Grand Prix Miami trophy.
And Josh is going to be on the play this game, so very important for him. Is he going to get those mana accelerants into play, or is he going to have a pretty slow start like he did in game 2? And will Reid finally get that Farseek that he's been craving so much?
Yeah. You see on the rails next to Reid, Glenn Jones covering the match, and William Jensen, teammate of Reid Dukes, both at the team open in Somerset and sort of in life in general.
Yeah.
They are teammates.
So Josh looks over his opening 7, and it looks like he's going to keep, and so is Reid. So we're going to have both players keep 7 cards for game 3, and Josh leads off with a Godless Shrine, but no 1-drop. Reid plays a Blood Crypt. Looks like Josh does have that Voice of Resurgence, and we're going to see it here on turn 2. He does have an Acidic Slime, it looks like, but I don't know how quickly he can get it out there. It looks like it's going to have to come out in turn 5, which might be a little too slow if Reid can get that Huntmaster.
And Reid just ripped that Farseek on turn 2.
Huge card there. It looks like he does have another Farseek in his hand, so.
Listen, the man's due.
He's due.
It's time.
So Farseek, very important card here for Reek. Very rarely do you actually jump mana on the Junk Reanimator deck, but you know, Josh does not have a mana accelerant, so Reid actually ahead on mana now, which is very big in this matchup.
Yeah, both for the tempo of the game and to give Reid a buffer from potential Acidic Slime shenanigans later in the game. It's really important for him to just have a high density of mana.
Yeah, so Josh's hand is very, very weak here. He has a bunch of land. He has a mulch, but he's going to have to get pretty lucky with this mulch if he wants to have a chance here. He hits an Unburial Rites. He hits a Thragtusk, so doesn't hit any land, but he does at least get an Unburial Rites and a pseudo fatty, so to speak. So probably not the fatty he wanted. Probably wants an Acidic Slime there, but either way, at least he hits an Unburial Rites. Let's see what Reid does in his turn here. He has access to 4 mana now, and again, obviously there's a lot of cards in Reid's deck at 4 mana that can be pretty impressive here.
And you've seen Reid all through the elimination rounds pause when he's drawn anytime it could possibly rationalize to Miracle of Bonfire. He has not had it most of the time, but there is a 2 toughness creature in play, and Reid has 3 mana, so he's sort of going through the motions of not wanting to make it obvious to Josh whether or not he has a bonfire in hand.
So yep, here comes Olivia, and I think the fact that Josh actually milled over one of the Garruk Relentless, I think that's the only Garruk that he has, or he has 2 Garruks in his deck. So I think Reid kind of felt, okay, I think the coast is clear to let my Olivia enter play. You only have 1 Garruk left in your deck to potentially kill my Olivia.
He's going to put him to the test. Also, Reid just generally has to be efficient with his mana when he's facing down the threat of Acidic Slime.
Yep.
He can't afford to just let certain turns burn off because it's potentially his mana will be taxed later in the game.
So Josh just has an Unburial Rites on turn 4 for a Thragtusk, bringing him up to 25. However, Reid will have an active Olivia on his turn with 4 mana, potentially deal with a Voice of Resurgence if he chooses, or turn a Thragtusk into a Vampire.
So if Reid is able to continue to make his land drops and Josh does not have an answer to this Olivia, it's very likely that this Olivia just runs away with the game.
Yeah, we've seen it before, and it's one of the reasons that Jund players feel like they have a good matchup against Reanimator, just because of how powerful Olivia is in this matchup. And we have seen players play cards like Sever the Bloodline in their main deck and bring in extra copies specifically to deal with cards like Olivia. Unfortunately for Josh, he does not have Sever the Bloodline anywhere in his 75.
Yeah. The deck is the Junk Reanimator deck, very soft to Olivia, as we've seen this weekend, and Josh's construction of the deck makes it even softer than a lot of builds typically are.
And here we see Olivia is going to probably come over into the red zone and attack. Right now, it just goes to 3. Reid's not going to ping anything. He does have a Farseek. I'd be interested to see if he wants to just keep developing his mana here. But no, he's going to play a Huntmaster of the Fells. Does he have a 5th land? 5th land here will ensure that maybe he could at least start stealing vampires eventually. But does he have it? Yep, so he does have a 5th mana. So if he draws another land next turn, or if he has one in his hand, he could shoot down the Thragtusk.
Yeah. And also worth noting that both Voice of Resurgence and Tristani, the sideboard cards that Josh has gone to, have felt very low impact in these games so far.
Yeah, Voice of Resurgence really is not doing much right now. If Reid has a 6th mana, he's going to be able to play the 6th mana past the turn, allowing the Huntmaster of the Fells to flip, and just dealing with the Voice of Resurgence that way. We know Josh has a bunch of lands in his hand, but beyond that, I think he just has a Thragtusk as action. He does have an Acidic Slime too, so he will be able to keep Reid off of some mana. But Acidic Slime not as effective when your opponent already has the Olivia and the Huntmaster in play.
I mean, the bind that Josh is in right now is he's not really in a position to threaten either Reid's life total in an appreciable manner or threaten the Olivia. And without doing one of those 2 things, Reid is going to have a huge edge as this game proceeds.
Yeah, and Reid just, he's going to take 5 from the Thragtusk. He's going to use the Wolf token to block the Voice of Resurgence, giving Josh an Elemental token, which is currently just a 2/2. Now let's see if Josh decides to play the Acidic Slime or the Thragtusk, I believe, in his hand. Now, I think you can make an argument for either, but I think Acidic Slime is probably where you want to be right here, or does he?
Well, the risk that I feel with Acidic Slime is what happens if he plays Acidic Slime is Reid can go untap, shoot down your Acidic Slime, pass, flip Huntmaster, shoot down your Elemental token, and then Josh is kind of just out of it.
Yep.
So he needs to advance his board with 3 toughness creatures at this point, possibly hoping Reid doesn't have a 6th mana, so he can. Olivia can't be too productive yet,
So, not sure what Reid drew this turn, but still, he can potentially allow the Huntmaster to flip on Josh's upkeep and then ping one of the Thragtusk, killing the Thragtusk, shrinking the Elemental down to a 3/3. Well, it'll remain a 3/3 rather, but he will have a 4/4 Ravager of Fells that he can block with it.
Yep.
So Reid can choose to continue to attack with Olivia or leave it back as just a giant blocker.
Yeah, a 6 land here would be great for Reid.
Yeah, he really wants a 6 land here so he can start pinging down Thragtusk and making his Olivia 6/6. And he does in fact have a 6 mana. He's going to play a Blood Crypt untapped, dropping himself down to 13. So now he has 6 mana. He can activate Olivia 3 times. And if he wants, he can just pass the turn, allowing Huntmaster of Fells to flip.
And for what it's worth, I have covered Reid in the finals of an invitational, and I've never seen his pace of play as methodical as I've seen through the elimination rounds of this Grand Prix. He's being very patient. These games have been awfully complicated, and he's just ensuring that nothing gets missed.
So Reid in a really good situation right now. He doesn't have to ping anything just yet. He can wait to see what Josh's attack is going to be like, and then he can actually choose if he wants to ping down an Elemental, or does he want to just do the last 1 point of damage to that Thragtusk that he used the Ravager of Fells on, and then ping another Thragtusk and steal on his turn with the Olivia.
He has so much flexibility with the way that the game proceeds from here.
Yeah, so Acidic Slime comes down now, but a little too late rather. Reid has 6 mana. He's going to be able to ping 3 times if he chooses, and then he'll still have access to 5 mana in his turn to steal, potentially steal a vampire that he creates.
Targeting the Stomping Ground.
Reid likely going to float a mana here. Yep, he's going to finish off that Thragtusk. That Thragtusk still has 2 damage on it from the Ravager of Fells flip. So it will die, and McClain will get a Beast token. So the Elemental is now a 4/4. So it can trade with the Ravager of Fells, but Stomping Ground goes to the graveyard, leaving with Reid with 4 mana up.
And now, again, you know, game 2 and 3, and largely defined by Olivia.
So Olivia is just going to grow to 6/6 and kill 6/6 and kill off the Acidic Slime. And now let's see what Reid tries to do on his turn now. A lot of options. He can attack for 6 in the air. He can grow his Olivia even further. Let's see if he has a 6 mana here. Again, very methodical with his draw step, with the potential Bonfire of the Damned.
This is a spot where it would actually be insane for Reid to Miracle Bonfire, so.
Yeah, he'll attack for 10 and deal 4, so it's a 14-point swing right there. Reid debating his options. Looks like we're maybe out of his draw step here.
Nope, that card's still. I've seen this before.
I've seen this before with him. Yeah, you're never quite sure what phase you're in because that card is just in between the deck and his hand. So
this could be a slow motion Bonfire.
No. So he draws the card into his hand, debating his options again. So many things that he can do here.
Although, of course, you know, while this is all going on, Reid has to be wary of the threat of Angel of Serenity. That's something that he's got to think of. Josh is at a point where he could hard cast it next turn potentially, and that's another complication. As dominant as Reid's position is, that's a card that could swing this around.
And I think by passing here, that's sort of what Reid is playing around. With Josh having access to 6 mana right now, if he plays another land, Angel of Serenity is a real threat for him. So let's see what Josh draws. It looks like it's another land. So
2 lands and an Acidic Slime in Josh's hand.
So Acidic Slime can come down again, keeping Reid, dealing with another one of Reid's lands.
And Reid has to be thrilled that that's all that Josh has to muster up this turn.
Yeah, it could be much, much worse. Looks like Reid has a Farseek in his hand. He's had that for quite some time, but again, doesn't really have an opportunity to cast it because he keeps wanting to ping things with the Olivia. So Reid debating his options again. Now he's in a position where not only can he kill the Acidic Slime, but he could also ping a Thragtusk, making it a vampire, and then potentially stealing it at his turn and start going on the offensive.
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, you have to figure Reid has to start attacking him to reduce the number of outs that Josh has to draw an Angel Serenity.
The thing is, Reid's life total is actually fairly low. He's on 11. He's taking a lot of shots here. So I think he wants to make sure the game is as stable as possible and then start knocking down Josh's life total in large chunks.
Yep. But I think if you steal that Thragtusk, you're in pretty good shape because, again, Angel Serenity is bad for you, but Josh McClain will only be attacking for 6, and you'll still have a beast from the Thragtusk. So
Reid seems so far still pretty committed to trying to contain Josh's board instead of getting too fancy with any sort of
Reid again in his draw
vampire
step.
shenanigans.
Is it a bonfire?
Could be.
Could be. Yeah. You'd figure he'd slam it, but you never know.
Well, again, his pace of play has been so methodical through these elimination rounds that I wouldn't expect him to windmill slam it unless it was for lethal.
Yeah, he's playing very conservatively here. Doesn't want to give an edge here to Josh. He knows that he's in pretty good shape, but again, we've seen things swing back and forth dramatically in these games, so Reid just wants to make sure he takes the correct line every turn.
And the Junk Reanimator deck has, if there's any deck that has the potential for powerful running draws, a Grizzly Salvage into an Unburial Rites, plus a big threat. You know, if any deck can really come back from these kind of positions, it's the one that Josh is piloting.
So we have 4 mana.
There
here.
it is.
There it is. So he did in fact draw a bonfire. So bonfire for 3 looks like it's going to deal 3 damage to Josh, dropping him to 22, leaving him with just a beast token off of the Thragtusk dying. And now Reid is going to send in the team. He's swinging for 9 in the air, along with a 4/4 Ravager of the Fells. He did take 2 from playing a Blood Crypt, but he has a Farseek, so he would have cast 2 spells this turn, flipping that Ravager of the Fells back to the Huntmaster of the Fells, gaining him 2 life, and getting a Wolf as a potential blocker.
Yep. Sorry for you viewers at home that are used to more dramatic windmill slamming, spiking, throwing at the opponent, miracle bonfires. Reid Duke taking a slower pace of these things.
Reid is not very dramatic. He just wins. Yeah. Reid's not interested in drama. He's interested in winning. So here we go. Ravager of the Fells flips on Josh's upkeep, bringing Reid up to 11 and giving him a Wolf token. Josh is at 9 life now, which is basically lethal to the Olivia.
And that's an Avacyn's Pilgrim. This looks like that Olivia is going to deal the lethal damage on.
I think it's an acidic slime.
Or
Either way, though, it's not an answer to
a
Olivia.
Green creature.
It is a green creature that cannot fly. Here comes acidic slime. Going to deal with the Stomping Ground, and Olivia with 6 counters on it, and Josh at 9 life is looking to take out Josh McClain. Even in the face of victory, Reid Duke, so methodical, plays a Wolf run for value.
Now, contemplating his attacks. Opponent dead on board, but
opponent desperate for that Olivia to enter the red zone so he can extend his hand. But Reid
begging for the sweet release of death.
Reid's so methodical. There it is. Reid Duke attacks with a 9/9 Olivia Voldarian in the air, crowning him Grand Prix Miami champion.
And you can hear, the cheers coming from the crowds, and Reid not only popular because of his column work and just as a personality, but the respect from his peers. Other professional players hold Reid in such high esteem that it feels kind of like magic makes sense when Reid Duke wins a tournament.
Yeah, so you actually feel like, oh, I understand why he won. He's a great player, and you're happy for him. I think he's one of the few players that, even if you don't know him, you're genuinely happy for him because he's just such a nice guy. Even if you haven't met him, he just has this sense that he gives off this good aura.
Yeah.
And so congratulations to Reid Duke. Defeats Junk Reanimator, a matchup that, a lot of people questioned how good is it for Jund, but Reid Duke never wavered. He consistently said, I think it's a good matchup for me. I don't care what other people say.